Hi, good afternoon, good evening, good morning to everyone who's logging into this. So, welcome to the LinkedIn Live, where we're going to talk about the five biggest recruitment challenges of 2025 revealed. And first of all, I'd like to say welcome to everyone who's joining us and want to start off by introducing ourselves. So, Matt, first of all, perhaps you could introduce yourself.
Yeah, well, first of all, we like hanging out at the same pool party, Damien and I. But
Absolutely.
we are co-founders of Talent Diagnostic Solutions, and that's one thing that we do, which you'll find out more about in this LinkedIn Live. Aside from that, my background is very much in the world of recruitment. I have worked both as an external recruiter and an external executive search professional, but also spent 9 years in-house at UBS running and driving recruitment efforts for them around different areas. Biggest one was I ran all non-front office hiring for UBS in Asia Pacific, including building out India, helping build out China, things like this. So an extensive background in recruitment. I'm also these days a coach. I focus in on enabling people to be sustainably successful. That can mean helping people plot their careers, but it also can mean looking at where people feel stuck, where people feel stress, where people are unfortunately burning out, which is what happened to me, and helping them get on the right path. Now, that does often fit quite nicely in with Talent Diagnostic Solutions when you consider around an important part of recruitment being retention and making sure that people are set up for success in their new role. So that's a bit about me. Damien.
Fantastic, thank you. So, I say, like you, I've got extensive recruitment background. So my background from management consulting, which I then took a massive cut in base salary to become a recruiter. And 24 years later, here I am. So I've been an executive recruiter 24 years, half that time in the UK, half that time in Hong Kong, back in the UK for 5 years now. And we set up Talent Diagnostic Solution beginning of this year and putting our experience together. Unlike Matt, my background's more on the commercial side, so working with organizations, particularly in the consumer industry, but also real estate, NGOs, and other organizations looking predominantly for senior finance people, finance directors, and CFOs. But I've also recruited heads of HR, chief operation officers, managing directors, and CEOs in the past. So quite extensive there. And like Matt, I'm also a coach. I do more leadership coaching and organizational coaching, as well as some career coaching as well. Became a certified coach 10 years ago, but as somebody I managed 18 years ago, said that I've been effectively coaching for a lot longer than that, but give my age away there, I think. But we set up Talent Diagnostic Solutions at the beginning of this year, primarily to be a consulting business to help organizations with their recruitment strategy. And the key part of that is helping an organization in every aspect of their recruitment and retention. And so we set this up, working with clients all over the world. Both of us are based in the UK, but do go out and meet our clients when we need to, whether online or in person. So, what are the five biggest recruitment challenges of 2025? Some are going to be more obvious than others, but wanted to share what these are and go through them one by one. So, pretty basic in a sense, but challenge number one: attracting the right candidates.
Yeah, I mean, this is the most common piece of feedback we're hearing right now. It's perhaps surprising when you consider that we're hearing a lot around the impact of AI and seeing cost-cutting measures and redundancies with firms trying to embrace AI and use that to streamline headcount and things like this. So I'm aware, perhaps more so than many other points in my career, other than when there's been big, market crashes, that there are really good people in the market right now. And despite the fact that there are really good people on the market looking for roles, there's a feeling, there's a sense of talent scarcity. Manpower Group's 2025 talent shortage report recently picked out that 76% of employers are struggling to fill roles because they can't find the skills they need, and that's as high as it's been in the last in the last 10-15 years, as far as I'm concerned. What comes out of that is two things. One, I think it's to do with the way that people now apply for roles. And this leads into this point about low quality applications. It's easier now than at any time in the past to apply for roles. And some of you will have seen that. So, very obvious things are, on LinkedIn, you see the quick apply button. And that leads to an ability for lots of people to very quickly and easily get their name in the frame for a job. And often candidates are taking the view of, I'd rather apply for more than less. I'd rather give myself more chance than less. And that can lead to hiring managers, HR professionals, recruitment professionals having a huge inbox full of CVs. And even more difficult than that, I'm aware of there being AI programs out there that scrape job boards and look for keywords. And when they see those keywords, when they find those keywords, they auto apply on behalf of whoever it is that's running these job searches. So in that sense, hundreds of CVs are coming through, and that's a real challenge, because how do you handle all those CVs whilst maintaining the perception of a good service? It's very easy to impact your reputation by lots of people saying, oh, well, I've applied for hundreds of roles with this employer and I've never heard anything back, and all of that. And that's not good feedback, and that should be being avoided. But when the person receiving the CVs is wading through hundreds and so many of them are not relevant, that's really difficult. And, further research, I saw Robert Walters' report not too long ago saying that 58% of employers say mid-level talent is harder to hire now than 3 years ago. And I think that's, again, because what's being looked for now is a sort of a more specialist need. Like every role in many industries now is looking for people that are able to embrace AI, or able to come in, even if it's not a technology role, looking for people to bring those skill sets and understand how they can enable those to maximize the opportunity within their role. So they're tending to look for quite specialist elements. We're seeing that there are certain job disciplines that are really struggling for good applicants because the skill sets are not that prevalent. And then the final one that we call out here is this bit about EVP misalignment. Are you actually attracting the people that you want? Is the messaging out there about your organization consistent? Is it providing the right message to market that is going to attract the kind of people that you want? And so many firms don't spend any time on this. They just bang a job spec out there and think, well, that'll do, because we're all busy. But getting the EVP right is so crucial. I mean, I don't know if you've got any particular thoughts on any of those, Damien.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I think the whole EVP side, so pardon the jargon, the employee value proposition. I think when an organisation is recruiting, and also it's not recruiting, but especially when looking to hire somebody, what values do they have? And what value is it going to be for that individual to work for that company? It's no longer the case as an organisation that people are going to be flocking to join there who've got the right skills and experience. You might have 500 applications, none of whom are relevant, and the people you want to hire are not going to join. And I think the EVP misalignment can be quite a common one, where an organisation has certain values on their website. They may or may not be living that out on a day-to-day basis, or hiring managers may not know about it. And I think people applying to join an organisation is a misunderstanding there, or misalignment. I think that can make a big difference. And I think when we go to an organisation, say, what do you really stand for? How is that put into effect across the business? And do people who apply for this organisation know about that? Why would they want to work for you? I think in particular, I think, maybe Gen Z, in particular, want to feel a real sense of purpose when they join an organisation. But I certainly would as well. And I think that if you don't have that, are we going to be applying for the right roles? So I think that organisations can miss out there.
Yeah, and look, I think there's also different, as you say, the candidate expectations are shifting, and so there's no guarantee that firms that previously used to get the creme de la creme, there's no guarantee that they're going to get those again. Even, I mean, I'm reflecting a few years ago now, I spent a while as the head of graduate recruitment for UBS and APAC. And even in that time, it wasn't a role I did for a long time, but we were already seeing the sort of impact where, for a period, there was nothing better than banking. Banks got the creme de la creme, the top talent. But then you start to see, actually, no, now it's more the Metas and the OpenAI and the very fast, innovative businesses it's not necessarily about brand and prestige, but actually about their agility and your ability within that organization to make a significant difference. So, what was previously something that certain firms or even industries didn't need to think about necessarily so much is something that really now needs drilling down into. And that can mean, for example, you might have to be more transparent about salary than you were previously. That is something that the market is telling us is really important right now. And yet it's something that historically has never been provided. And maybe for this particular organization, it might not be the right solution. But there are other organizations where we would say, yeah, got to look at this. Transparency around salary is something that people want. You've got to give that. So, yeah, that number one of attracting the right candidates is, I think, far and away one of the biggest pieces of feedback that we do here.
Absolutely. And also, but by the way, I was going to say, welcome Francis Hon. Really good to see you joining us today. I've known Francis for many years, so really good to have you joining our LinkedIn Live here. And in terms of salary transparency, I think it's more and more important now for organisations to share a salary range within an advert, and also talk about the other benefits on top of that. Because it'll also screen out people who are going to be looking for too much money for something. So if you're going to have to go through a whole process of asking people what they're looking for, understanding what they're expecting to earn their next job, and you're not going to be able to do so, or not going to be able to afford that, you are going to be wasting a lot of time, regardless of what AI or what tech you're using. So yes, challenge number one, not surprisingly, attracting the right candidates.
Yeah. Now, as we move on to number two, these are not unrelated. They're not standalone points. You'll see that these five are all interlinked. And number two is that there is slow or inconsistent hiring processes that are holding back firms' success. I will be frank, I hear this more from line managers rather than, say, HR or recruitment professionals. And there's this perception that, HR recruitment is simply providing a delay in the process. And this is all taking too long. I can assure from experience that it's in recruitment's and HR's interest to make sure that processes is streamlined and as quick as possible. But there are things that they can do. There are things that line managers can do to make these quicker. The average now in the UK, and we're not just talking to people in the UK here, but the average now in the UK is 8 weeks to hire someone. Now, for somebody from the banking industry going 8 weeks to find a lawyer, that's great, that's brilliant. But we're not just talking about that. We're talking about the average here across all industries and all role types. If you consider that that's, including finding a member of bar staff, which really should not take too long,
No.
The fact that the average is at around 8 weeks is telling of a story of really slow processes, and it goes back then to your ability to find the right people, because other statistics that are quite damning are that over 50% of candidates wait more than 3 months for a response after applying. And that means that, they're not going to apply to that firm again if that's what they're experiencing. So then, okay, they weren't maybe right for that role, but they could be good for roles in the future. So there's things that need to be done here. There's automations that can happen. There's clarity and commitment on communication that happen. 63% of candidates say communication from employers is poor. And that needs addressing. But also it says that those that are doing it right are going to stand out. So there's a real competitive advantage almost in your ability to hire the good people, that if you can get this right. And things that often come across are, there's too many interview stages. How many times have you heard, oh yeah, I've been through 7 rounds of interview? I don't know, Damien, what do you think is the optimal number of interviews in a process?
Well, it's interesting. I think even for a senior role, I would say 3. Excuse me. So I recruited another senior finance people for significantly sized organisations, whether it's a 50 million turnover business upwards, and even for very senior finance roles. I think that if you have more than 3, it's going to be a bit too much. And I don't mean you should only be meeting one person at a time. If you have one interview meeting 7 people, I think you can combine that and you can move that along faster. And I think it's not only how long the whole process takes, but how quickly do you give feedback after? As somebody who's been a third-party recruiter for many years, there's nothing more frustrating in taking a call every single day and saying to somebody, really sorry, that interview went on 2 weeks ago. We haven't had any feedback yet. I think it's not only in terms of how many interview stages there should be, and I do believe 3 should be optimal senior level, but I think it's not only about the interview stages. I think it's also about how quickly you give feedback after.
Yeah.
And I recommend giving some feedback within 24 hours whenever possible.
Again, it make your company stand out, because unfortunately the vast majority are not. So if you can embed that commitment, if you can develop that in your processes, then you're going to be standing out if you're doing that. But it is also talking to poor coordination across stakeholders. And yes, some of that is the communication where, I've been there as an in-house recruiter, having an external recruiter calling me going, I need to give some feedback to my candidate. And I'm like, I know. And I haven't heard anything from the hiring manager. Everyone's going, but it's not to blame the hiring manager too. Sometimes the hiring manager gives it and the in-house recruiter doesn't then pass it on because they want to gather all the feedback first and decide what they're doing before they give feedback. No, we've got to have that transparency. But sometimes the poor coordination is in other ways. And this comes on to a point we'll touch on in, I think, point 4 or 5. But, you're finding interviewers asking the same questions in each interview. Not only is it 6 interviews, but it's 6 interviews where the exact same things have been assessed. And so what's the point in that? Like, why? What are you getting in terms of value other than another person getting to ask the same set of questions? You can combine 5 people into one interview if you're going to just ask the same questions across all 5 people.
Absolutely. And I think it takes, it's about that coordination across stakeholders as well. Why not get the people in the same room at the same time and join the interview together where possible? And it's interesting how we talk about the half-life enthusiasm. Within 48 hours, if somebody hasn't had any feedback at all, there's a significant drop in enthusiasm for that organisation. One extreme example I once had is I had a call from an organisation in August, and they said to me, Damien, that person we interviewed in February, would they like to come back in? And I said, I'll be totally honest, I don't know. But they could well have another role now. And I had to call back later on that day and say that individual's now got another job. But that individual not only accepted another offer, but they said even if they were still looking, they wouldn't work for an organization to take that long to make decisions. And so it's extremely important just to make sure we communicate well with people and get back to them. We talked about EVP, but looking at reputation as a whole, the reputation of an organization will suffer if you take too long to give feedback.
Indeed. So on to number 3. Number 3 is one that we're hearing quite a lot as well. Number 3 is around perception of quality of hire and early turnover. I was speaking to a head of talent in a particular bank earlier this year who was saying that they'd had a real significant problem with senior hires. And this goes across the market, actually. Data shows that about 20% of senior hires don't last beyond 12 to 18 months. Now, this particular head of talent that I was speaking to had figures that were even higher than that. So I won't exactly say who they were, but, it's so crucial to get onboarding of people right and to get the right people through the door. So, again, these points are all interlinked, and we'll come on to another aspect of this in one of the next points. But this notion that we're hiring the wrong people, what is the assessment that we're putting these people through? What are the actual skill sets that we're hiring for? Are we hiring for what is needed on day one of the role? Or are we hiring for what the organization needs and adaptability and flexibility and where the role might go on day 365, day 730? What are we actually looking at when we're considering what we need? And so many firms still look at this piece around what do we need on day one and prioritize that over and above everything else. So how are you actually assessing the quality of the hire that you're making? But then how are you setting them up for success? Because sometimes it is the person, and whatever that person is, we don't know. But so often it's because they've not been set up for success in the right way. They've not been onboarded correctly. And then that leads to early turnover. With the firm that I was talking about, there was a recognition that actually people were doing really well in the first 6 months. They were sort of ticking off all that low-hanging fruit. But because they were not investing the time, nor had the support been given to them to make all the necessary connections, to understand the true power structures in the organization, to understand the kind of politics that are at play, and therefore understand how real change happens, how to drive through not just the quick fix tactical change, but how to actually make bigger scale strategic change happen. No time had been invested in that. And so they then sit there and they're like banging their head against a brick wall, going, I don't know how to get anything done here. And, communication breaks down on both sides. And then, suddenly before the 18-month mark, this key hire is back out the door again, and you're looking to make another hire. And again, this is across all industries. I was speaking to somebody within the hospitality trade the other day, and there's a huge problem with early turnover in the hospitality trade. So, it's about looking at, well, who are you hiring for and why? Because there are going to be certain groups where attrition is going to be high. So why continue to do that? Why not look at different ways of hiring, different types of hire, all of these sorts of things? Because back to my earlier point right at the very beginning, there's a lot of good people in the market right now. So maybe it's a case of shifting what you're looking for a little bit. The next slide shows some of the things that we really see coming out here and hear coming out here. If we flip on to that next slide.
Absolutely. I think before we go and look at that, I think in terms of quality of hire, something I find that many organizations don't do, they want to get somebody in quickly and the right price. But they don't do any real due diligence in terms of that individual. There might be lengthy interview process and sometimes too many, but have they really had any proper candidate due diligence? And the same way I'd advise a job seeker to do their due diligence about a potential employer. I think the organization should invest some time and money into doing significant due diligence into the individual. And I think that's something we can certainly help with, and we've done in the past.
Yeah, I mean,
more than just quick reference call with with a friend of theirs who used to work in the same office.
Yeah, I mean, it's one thing the Australians get right, but it's very difficult to port that over to another culture, because in Australia there's just this acceptance that what's going to happen is your company is the company, sorry, that you're interviewing with is going to call your company up and ask potentially even your boss, who doesn't yet know that you're looking for a new job, what's this person like? And it's now the norm and it's accepted. Now, I don't think you can suddenly port that into another country's culture or environment.
No,
It won't work. But there are essences of that you can take, because there is this real strong culture of effective due diligence. And because everyone's doing it, it's an accepted practice. But you don't have to call the person's existing boss. You don't even have to call the person's existing employer. There are other ways of doing that due diligence.
absolutely. So it's just something that many organisations don't do, and certainly don't do within significant detail. So, as I say, so misaligned expectations, weak assessments, and onboarding gaps.
Yeah, and I think this misaligned expectations is a big one that triggers this. You know, person A, line manager, has view on what role is going to be and what it's going to do and what it's going to deliver. But matrix manager B and key stakeholders C have their views of what this role is to do and what this person is going to come on to do. And that doesn't necessarily align with person A. So when you're going out to hire, when you're building that case, it starts right there. You've got to get that alignment on what everyone thinks that hire is coming on to do, and make sure that everybody has the same expectations. And then that those expectations are really clearly communicated to the candidate and assessed against those expectations. So that's what we mean around that misalignment. And then weak assessment, as I say, that's going to be something else that we come on to. But then those onboarding gaps as well. You know, again, so many firms don't really have a formalized onboarding program. They might assign a buddy and then leave it all on that buddy, or, you know, certainly in banking, there's a view that, you know, everyone has to go through compliance training. It's a fact of life. Everyone has to do it, but seemingly sometimes the onboarding program starts and finishes at that compliance training. And, you know, there's nothing more, there's nothing bigger. It's about, you know, who can I introduce my new hire to get this process going of settling them into the organization? How can I set them up for success? I hear from hiring managers, I haven't got time for this. I just need them to get on board and get up and running ASAP. Okay, but fail to get this right, and they're going to go again, and then you're going to be far worse off. So it's got to invest that time, really. Otherwise, yeah, this issue that we're seeing, this quality of hire perception, or this early turnover problem, oh, we've hired the wrong person, they've gone, or we hired the right person but they didn't stay. You know, these things happen, and it's a real problem.
And the organisations that don't look ahead to that first 30, 60, 90 days and beyond, organisations that might, for example, include that training, and that training clearly is going to be very important, but also, does that person feel included? You know, are they made to feel part of the team? Are they, I say it's good for somebody to have a buddy or mentor within the organisation, but how are they going to really be on board in the company to not only give them the knowledge they need, but also a sense of belonging with an organisation? What one company we were talking to was had a situation where 50% of the people who joined were leaving within the first 12 weeks. So it's significantly high. But then one thing being communicated to people is, when you join us, we're not going to give you business cards because a lot of people don't make it. And so it was almost that assumption they may not be good enough. And I think the reason they did that was to highlight to people they have to really impress them early on. But I think if you're going to give people that message at the beginning, it's not a positive sign. It's not going to make somebody feel excited to work at an organisation and perform if you're told that you may not last anyway. And I think it's important to get those expectations aligned really well at the beginning.
Yeah, indeed. So challenge number 4: rising costs and falling ROI. Yeah, look, it's commercial reality, isn't it? Everyone's having their budgets challenged right now, and that goes for hiring teams, recruitment teams, that goes for what we can spend on recruitment, all of these sorts of things. Agencies, we've both worked for agencies, you far more than I. And certain businesses will go down the route of trying to cut out agencies completely because they simply can't afford their spend. Well, sometimes, frankly, you can't afford not to. That might surprise some of my team who always used to feel under the cosh from me, not necessarily to use agencies. But when you look at the overall cost of a hire, the longer it takes to hire, the more those costs go up. But where you are engaging an agency, are you getting the most from that agreement? You're paying a fee, but what does that fee include? What parts of the process are they specifically going to be helping you with? What are you going to be giving them in return? Are you negotiating preferential rates for exclusivity? What's going on there? The wasted advert spend. Yeah, just throwing adverts out there. It was interesting, actually. We started at UBS to go through a real assessment process of, is this a job we actually want to advertise? Because every time we advertise, it uses up a certain slot which has a certain spend. And actually, is this a role that benefits from advertising? And sometimes that assessment doesn't take place. It's just, we'll stick it out there because
automatically.
that worked for us. That particular channel worked for us 5 years ago. Well, the world has moved on in 5 years and things are done differently. So, is that still the right way to spend your money? Or is it just going to disappear into a black hole? Or is it going to get you 3,000 completely irrelevant applications? There's a certain job board that I can think of, certainly in Asia, where I would never post on it because I knew the moment that I did, oh my word, my inbox was just going to fill up with totally irrelevant applications. So, really thinking about what you're spending and where around the advertisement, and then the inefficient systems. We had a great conversation about the implementation of AI in recruitment processes with Nicholas from Deutsche and also Alex, who's an AI expert. And the thing is, there's this view that, we'll implement AI and it'll fix all of our challenges. It can, if it's much like a human, set up for success. And what we mean by that is that everyone's aligned on what this technology is meant to do. And then the time is invested to ensure that the data streams going into that technology are correct. Because one of those things is garbage goes in, garbage comes out, no matter how good the system. So you've got to really make sure that you're setting your systems up for success in the same way, and that they are then optimized for efficiency and speed. But then you've got to really look at the balance there, because I'll be frank with you, spend on recruiting systems for some organizations is an imperative. For others, it's not. So a unified one size fits all approach is not right either. You got any particular horror stories around costs and spend here?
It's interesting. One organisation I was talking to was looking to spend a significant amount of money on a new AI-based system to look at recruitment, to automate responses to people applying for jobs. And they were looking at this shiny new thing they're going to spend money on. And it was like, this is going to solve all our issues. And we looked into it in a bit more detail and found out the system they already had, the people were not using, could already do that. And so they were going to spend a significant amount of money on a new system, which would be very good in certain circumstances. But what they actually needed it for, they could already do using their current system if only people use that. So we're not saying don't use agencies. We're not saying don't advertise jobs. We're not saying don't invest in systems. What we're saying is make sure you're getting the right return on investment. If you have a system, make sure people are using it appropriately. If you're working with agencies, make sure you have a really close relationship with them. And I've worked with some really good recruitment agencies that had a real sense of relationship and a really working partnership. And I would say things like, for example, agencies and advertising. If you're working with lots of recruitment agencies, find the best one, work with them exclusively, and maybe ask them to advertise a role instead. And you're getting much more consultative process there. It's much more joined up.
Yeah.
And then rather than having to trawl through 200 CVs, maybe you only have to look at 5. And so the significant amount of time that's going to save you significantly increases your return on investment as well.
Yeah, absolutely.
And I think that so somebody said to me, and I said that myself and Matt and a Talent Diagnostic Solution help organisations improve their recruitment strategy and also reduce costs. Someone said, what do you do to reduce costs? Just tell them not to use agencies. And absolutely not. Agencies have a vital role to play in many ways, but to make sure you're getting, as Matt said, the best return on that. Look at the terms of business. What have you signed up to? What happens if that person doesn't work out? If an organisation truly streamed the candidates and found the best person for you, would they, for example, be willing to extend the guarantee period? So there are different things we can look at in order to make sure you're absolutely getting value for money for anything you've invested in, paying for agencies or paying for adverts.
Absolutely.
So
moving on to number 5. Yeah, and as we said before, these things link together. So limiting hiring capability and confidence. And this is more a point around, again, it links back to this thing about companies not necessarily being overly confident that they're hiring the right people, because there isn't necessarily a trust in the assessment that's being done. The number of times I speak to line managers who don't feel that they have a very clear mandate to ask specific questions on specific topics that are going to be a crucial part of the process. It's like, well, no, I get asked to interview and I just sort of do the best I can. But, how are we actually making sure that that is consistent? I always remember challenging a selection decision that had been made by one particular hiring manager who said, I loved the answer that this person gave to this question. It was exactly the right answer that I was looking for, and it told me that they were the right candidate. And I was like, brilliant, that's fantastic. I'm glad to hear that. What did the other candidates say that was different, that didn't give you that confidence? I didn't ask them that question. So how do you know that those other 4 that you interviewed wouldn't have given an even better answer than the one that you really liked? Yeah, it's that inconsistency there that we're talking about. But yeah, these are the 3 areas, this unclear role definitions. What's my part in the process could mean, but also it means this, back to this, what is the role actually meant to be delivering? What is it meant to be doing? Does person A and person B and person C, who are the stakeholders for the role, all agree on what success looks like for this role? So are we all interviewing to the same criteria? Are we all on the same page as to what we really need to look for? And, this can then lead to HR firefighting, as we say there, later on in the process, because, there's a lack of clarity on decision, and, HR are left trying to push this forwards because we know how important it is to make quick, effective hires. But yeah, because things haven't been set up right at the outset, it's sort of a load of firefighting at the end to try and recover the situation.
And I think in terms of those unclear role definitions too, sometimes in larger organisations there'll be, there'll be different structures where somebody won't have one person they'll be reporting to if they are hired by the organisation. There's more than one potential hiring manager. There's an HR team. There's also an internal and external recruiters who all have different understandings of what they're meant to be doing as part of that process.
Yeah.
And sometimes I had a case 4 years ago where an internal recruiter after 10 days, had put together a shortlist of 5 people and was about to go out and talk to the external recruiters about getting these people in for interviews, had told recruiters who they were going to get in, went back to the line managers and said, "We've got some people lined up." And one of the line managers said, "Oh, it's okay, I've already filled that role." And so they hadn't even communicated internally that they'd filled a position, at least verbally. And so they then had to go back and take a step back and try and undo some of the damage there. But it certainly can be issues when people aren't communicating properly internally here.
Indeed. So yeah, these are our 5 biggest topics that we hear most regularly from the firms that we're speaking to. And as I say, these come from hiring managers, these come from HR directors, these come from recruitment teams, and this is what we're hearing in the market. And the data backs all of this up. This isn't us just going, yeah, we've heard it from 3 people, so that means it's true. We're gathering data on this stuff as well. 29% of UK, and this is UK, I appreciate, 29% of UK organizations rank recruiting qualified staff as their number 1 HR challenge. It's like, got to get this right. And we're all really, really busy. And I used to work with hiring managers who were under the pump because someone has resigned, and then it's taken them 3 weeks to get sign off to have that role replaced. So there's one inefficiency, bringing down that speed to make those kind of decisions. Can this person hire? If so, same rank, different rank, what's the budget that they've got? Let's get that clarity really quickly. Because all of a sudden the person has a month notice period, and you've eaten up the first 3.5 weeks getting the approval to hire, and now they're gone. And so that leaves the hiring manager in the situation where they've got to make a quick hire. So then when you start to engage and discuss around, right, we've got to get this alignment on the role, and we've got to make sure that the job description really reflects what you need, really picks out the sort of the key VP elements, really focuses on the right skill sets. And the hiring manager is just going, just repost what we had the last time. I haven't got time. Just repost. I think I wrote a good job description about 3 years ago. Just repost that. Just use that. So yeah, these things snowball, and people say, I haven't got the time to do this. And I hear it, and it's completely understandable. But what we always challenge back with is, frankly, you haven't got the time to not get this right. The cost of getting it wrong is so high. The average cost of replacing somebody in a mid to senior level role in the UK is £50,000. That's not taking into account salary and everything like that. That is direct and indirect costs in terms of the cost of hire, opportunity cost missed whilst you're waiting for that person to come in, relationships lost when the person's left, all these factors. £50,000. You don't invest the time in getting your hire right, and all of a sudden you're looking at another £50,000 spend because they've gone again. So yeah, it's a difficult situation, and getting that balance between I haven't got time to and actually you can't afford not to is a difficult one. But that's where we've got solutions. That's where we
Absolutely
want to give you actionable things to take away with you today. So let's dive into these. What are our solutions? Well,
the 3 C's.
I like simplicity. We've got the 3 C's: clarity, consistency, and capability. These are the 3 things that we recommend will improve your hiring processes. But what do we mean by that? So clarity. Yeah, getting, as we've been saying through this, defining the success outcomes and actually getting alignment across key stakeholders what those success outcomes are. Aligning the role to the business need. The hiring manager will always be biased to the fact that they want somebody to come in and hit the ground running and do X, Y, and Z that the old person did on day one. So we've got to go get the person across the street that's doing the exact same role in another organization. Is that actually what the business needs? Can you significantly speed up the process potentially? Because actually what you really need is somebody who knows the systems, the processes, the people, i.e., okay, they may not have X skill set, but actually taking somebody internally into that role might be the thing that the business actually needs. Or are we considering, as we said earlier, what the business will need on day 720? Because you hire a square peg to fit a square hole, and on day 70 that square hole's become an oblong, that person's no longer right unless they bring certain other aspects. And then that clarity on EVP and messaging. You'll see so many companies put like a fancy value and purpose statement on their website to attract candidates. That alone is a step forward, because some don't. But then how
Absolutely.
does that purpose statement, how does that EVP translate? How does that impact the experience that the candidate has? How do they see, hear, and feel that from the people that they're interviewing with and the process that they've gone through? Actually having that clarity is vital.
And it's interesting too, you said about aligning the role to the business needs or the organisation needs. If somebody's left, even if somebody's a direct replacement for somebody who's left, and that previous employer was in place for 3 years, that organisation could be in a very different place now than it was 3 years ago.
Yeah.
And so simply copy and pasting an old job description may not be right anyway, and almost certainly isn't. And I think that, again, clarity on the EVP and messaging is so important. And to make sure I actually live that. One organisation I knew, I was actually going to meet an HR director some years ago, and I turned up 20 minutes early, and I was going to meet up after lunch. And I saw some people leaving this office for lunch. And I said to them, but out of interest, what organisation do you work for? And they told me which organisation they work for. And I said, just out of interest, what values this organisation? No one could tell me. Someone told what the values they thought it would be. And so I had a very interesting conversation 20 minutes later. And that organisation was actually able to simplify their value statement and actually make sure that every level of the organisation, people knew what it meant and lived up to it. So, for example, many organisations say they care about people. But if you say you care about people, take an hour of somebody's time or 2 hours of somebody's time and don't get back to them for a week, are you really living those values? So I think it's about absolute clarity and living those out.
Yeah, absolutely. And this is not just about making the right hire. These are also commercial imperatives as well.
Absolutely. Charles, welcome to the LinkedIn Live. Good to see you from Hong Kong.
And this leads on then to solution number 2 around consistency. Streamlining hiring stages and being consistent in that. It's all very well one group, one hire, you do the 3 interviews as we're suggesting, but then the next hiring manager isn't bought into that and does 7, and the message going to market is not the one that you want. So it's got to be streamlined, but it's got to be consistent. And then looking at, right, what's being assessed in interview 1, what's being assessed in interview 2, what's being assessed in interview 3, to make sure that there is that skilled-based structured assessment taking place, and it's not just 4 or 5 rounds of exactly the same interview. You might think that's being consistent in a certain way, but unfortunately not. It's really about making sure that the assessment is consistent. And back to that earlier story about, that fantastic answer that candidate gave to the question, and the question wasn't asked to any of the other candidates. Make sure that the way that you're assessing the people is consistent, that the same questions are being asked, so the same assessment can be made. And then, as we've said again, that consistency of communication and decision flow, making sure that you're getting back to candidates. And look, if you're a big enough organization and you've got the budget, you can automate some of that. You can set up a system so that the hiring manager puts certain things in, and that automatically will update the candidate. There needs to be education on around that to make sure that the right things are being said and the wrong things are not being said. But at least, you can automate that and make it easier. But if that's not possible, if the budget doesn't exist around that, there are things that you can do to make sure that communication flow is happening.
Absolutely, it's internal communication too beforehand, isn't it?
Yeah,
So
yeah.
once somebody went for an interview, and funnily enough, they did actually end up accepting an offer there, but they weren't impressed at the beginning. They walked into an interview. The hiring manager walked in and said, "Good morning, nice to meet you." They looked down on a piece of paper, read their name, and they hadn't even prepared sufficiently beforehand to know who they were meeting. And they admitted they hadn't even seen the CV beforehand. So I think that taking time to communicate, prepare for that, is vital in any process.
Yeah. And then finally, we're going to come on to capability. Yeah, equipping the hiring managers so they feel comfortable and confident knowing what they're assessing and why that's important. Improving your tools and your systems. That might be that you can make an investment in technology, but we're not just talking about technology systems. We're talking about the process that you use. And that might not mean you spend a penny at all, but that you have the right kind of expectations in place and everyone knows what they need to do and the feedback loops are clear and the communication going back to the candidate is clear. Those systems need to be sharp and improved. And then, yeah, that strengthening of the onboarding for retention. We said earlier on that so many hires fall down after the person has joined because the whole onboarding process wasn't managed correctly. And I'd go back to it, as I said, that average cost of £50,000 to a hire, the direct cost alone is over £10,000. So, you might say for big companies, £10,000 is a drop in the ocean, but we're talking about averages here. So that's across every single hire. And so, get enough of those wrong, you're running a pretty sizable bill. Could probably use that to invest in a new technology system if you didn't keep getting it wrong, So yeah, that capability is crucial for ensuring that the right people are being hired in the right way and then that they are retained.
Absolutely. And in terms of what we do as an organization, so we Talent Diagnostic Solutions, we have a product called the Talent Diagnostic. And with regard to this, what we can do for our clients is within 2 weeks, we can give you insights and strategies to ensure you get the right people at the right time without excessive costs. And so we'll set up a meeting, which would be 90 minutes long. And they're very structured questions regarding the recruitment processes, predominantly over the last 12 months, but also beyond that. This is a very structured meeting. We prefer to do it in person, but online where necessary, where we go through that and gather as much information as we can. And we then provide a tailored report for you to present you strategies you can action immediately. So it's not just, here's some interesting information, but these are quick wins you can do, and also suggestion of things you can do further down the line to make a real impact, to make sure you get the right people, you're not paying excessive money, and you're retaining the people you have. And I think these things are very important. And obviously, alongside this, there's certain information we request an organisation shares with us, but it's very thorough, and people are quite surprised at the depth of information, feedback we can give in such limited time. So we cover everything here. So hope you can see that on the screen. So strategic alignment, the whole strategy, looking at assessment and selection, that time to hire and candidate experience, and everything we've discussed so far. So making sure that we're getting the right people, onboarding them, they believe in the values of the organisation, that we're paying, they're paying the right amount of money, getting a good return on that investment, and using the right technology to do so. So these are all areas we ask a lot of questions about in that 90 minutes, but we're able to give feedback on all of these areas to make sure that an organisation's in a better place afterwards. So that's really what we do and what we focus on.
Yeah, I think it's worth saying, and I don't want to dilute the message here, that we can and do go deeper than this. We will make suggestions of changes that can be made. And the idea is, if we're trying to, minimize the cost for you as an organization in doing this. The idea is that these are things that you can implement. But if you need our help with that implementation, if you need a hand holding through that process, we're also capable of doing that. But this is the starting point that we recommend. Getting this quick, easy view on what's going on, what can we change, what can we improve, and how do we do that quickly and easily to have the maximum impact. So that's what we're looking to do with this diagnostic.
Absolutely, and it's a starting point for that. So I don't know how many people are here live now, but does anyone have any specific questions at this stage? I know we only have a few minutes to go, but if anyone does have any specific questions, you're very welcome to ask below. And if anyone would like to reach out to us directly, we'd be very happy to meet you and have a free initial half an hour conversation. So if you want to have a one-to-one discussion with us, we'd be very happy for you to book a meeting straight into our calendar. So feel free to use this code here to book a meeting with us, or comment below, or contact us directly in order to set up a one-to-one meeting, and we can discuss whether we feel we can help your particular organization there.
Indeed. Yeah, I'm a technological dinosaur, so the ability to scan a QR code to directly book a meeting in someone's diary, yeah, it's fantastic.
It does make it a bit easier, doesn't it?
It does make it easier, and this is where technology applied in the right way can make things easier for your business and your hiring processes. And it's about analyzing the potential spend on that versus the return on the investment that you're going to get. So yeah, I'm not actually seeing any questions coming in at this point on my side. Are you, Damien?
No, not on this side either. I think that either means that we've covered it all already, or that people want to book it one-to-one. And I think, in summary, what I would say is none of the 5 biggest challenges in recruitment we've heard over the last year, and that's predominantly in the UK, but also beyond, none of them are shocking. But all of them we can do something about. There are ways to avoid these challenges in the new year. And I think the key thing is it doesn't have to be that way. We can make an impact, and working together, we can see what we can avoid in the year ahead.
Yeah, I mean, the really good news, as you say, is that every challenge that we've spoken about there is fixable, but it can't be done with isolated tactics like just a new job advert that's going to fix it, or a new tool, or some last minute hiring sprints that we're going to do to try and close out the year. Sustainable recruitment improvement comes from focusing on those 3 levers that we've spoken about: clarity, consistency, and capability. And those are designed to improve attraction, improve speed, improve quality, and reduce your costs. They're the foundation of a healthy recruitment process. So hopefully everyone will feel today that we've given data, we've given insight, and a framework you can use there to diagnose your own recruitment challenges, because these are the same areas that we look at to support organizations. And as Damien has said, if you'd like help in assessing where process is strong, where it needs attention, we can provide that diagnostic for you. Happy to have that 30-minute chat to give you more detail on that and see if it could work for you by booking in on this meeting. But I think from my side, that's everything that I wanted to say today, and I hope everyone's found that useful. Damien?
Absolutely. Here, I just want to say thank you to everyone who's joined us live, and everyone's going to be watching us later. And thank you so much for joining us. So from here in Wiltshire, over and out.
Here in Tunbridge Wells as well, with my water bottle. We still haven't got drinking water. That's my hope for the Christmas.
I know that's not good, is it?
My hope for Christmas, my Christmas wish is that I can get some clean drinking water. What's your Christmas wish, Damien?
Well, I think if it was a little warmer, that would always be good. But I think it's probably not so likely Christmas time. But I think for us all to be stay healthy would probably be a good thing.
Indeed. So Christmas wishes, best Christmas wishes to everybody. Have a great Christmas and New Year. And indeed, hope to hear from you and help you out in 2026.
Take care. Bye-bye.